Alrighty, hello and welcome to the Creedcast 2025. This is our official. Do we call this a? Well, no, I think the first episode was last week officially, but this was meant to be officially the first episode of the year up until the Ken news came out. But go back and listen to that one if you want to hear us chat for almost 2 hours in the end about the Ken Hinkley decision and all the ramifications with that and how we feel about it, how we feel about Josh coming in as well. There was a lot to chat about in that episode last week with the Ken decision. So any thoughts that you want to hear from us about that? I'm sure we'll touch on it a bit as we preview the season upcoming tonight as we record this on Tuesday the 18th of February late in the evening. But yeah, any of the more bigger thoughts that we have about that was in last week's episode. So go back and listen to that on your Spotify, Apple Pods, YouTube, whatever you feel like. But my name's Dave. As always, thank you for joining us. 2025 is coming up quick. Trial games coming up this Friday against the Crows up at Mount Barker. So it's all coming up quick. So Jamie's here with me to chat about how we're feeling about 2025, everything going forward. So g'day, Jamie. Welcome back to 2025. Once again, I say welcome back after last week.
Hello, Dave. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Creedcast preseason show, episode 1.
The Phantom Menace?
After the header that was the Ken Hinkley. Yeah. That was like the foreword to the novel that we're about to write or record.
Yes.
Welcome to anyone new. Thanks for jumping on board. Thank you for everyone returning that's tuned in or viewed us on YouTube last year in particular. Looking forward to breaking down what we know now and then what we'll eventually know as the season unfolds.
Yes, yeah, we'll be back weekly from now on as you know, we're going to be, covering the preseason game. So next week we'll come back and talk about what we saw on Friday night. May not be as extensive as the in-season preview reviews go because I think Jamie's enjoying his wine disappearing on screen. Is that what was going on there?
Yeah, that's exactly what was happening.
That was great. We'll be back. We'll talk about the Crows game next week and everything. But tonight is all about just talking about the season upcoming as a whole, how we're feeling about it, talk about the positional groups a little bit and everything in between. And as I said, kind of to start off, I think before we get into the positional groups, and I know we want to talk about best 23s and that kind of thing. Just overall, I know we talked about it. We were on Eddie Corn's podcast a month ago now, and you and I have talked a little bit, in our own conversations about how the season, how we might think it might play out, but or how we're feeling about it. But now we're on air. We're talking to the people. How are you feeling going into this year, Jamie? How are we? How are we feeling about the overall experience that 2025 might bring for us Port Adelaide fans?
Yeah, look, I mentioned on Eddie's show that I was heading into this season with a little bit of trepidation. I think that's mostly born out of the changes that we've made and a bit of uncertainty of how it'll all piece together. But like we mentioned in last week's forward episode to the season, excited to enjoy it in a little bit of a different way. Generally excited for every football season. It's just another side of life for me, socially, personally. Yeah, it's just an exciting time of the year for people like us who love footy. In a Port Adelaide sense, though, generally excited. I mentioned last week that cricket season had been so fantastic. I wasn't really looking forward to it, but now the wheels are really in motion. Obviously, football is capturing a lot of the attention on sports radio and whatnot. So once that all begins, the fire starts to burn a little bit, and you kind of just want to watch your team play. I think that's where I'm at now. I really just want to see them play. I want to see the new toys fit in and ply their trade. A little bit of trepidation, but also excitement as well, in a weird way.
Yeah, I kind of generally agree with that. It was the off season while it was in the midst of cricket season and football felt really far away. There was a little bit of that residual negativity hanging over from how our season finished, and then obviously the Dan Houston leaving, all that stuff. I think was the last thing that was on my mind with Port. But then once we started looking forward, once the season started dawning on us quite quickly, and I think it was when I went down to open training back in
Yeah.
late January, and seeing the boys out there. Zach was full of chat. I wanted to do an episode on that myself and just talk about it, but I just didn't get the chance to. But Butters was out there full of chatter. Everyone looked pretty. There was a lot of good energy out there. Fans, obviously, a very good fan turnout. It was a nice day, nice and warm and sunny, but not too bad for a January day. It was just a beautiful, beautiful day to be down at Alberton. And seeing some of the new recruits out there as well, seeing Pal Pepper back out there. And he was
Hmm.
still, I think he was still in the pink hat, but he was taking part pretty much with the main group, and not any real strapping on his knee or anything like that. There was a lot of things in that day that
Nice.
made me start like kind of cut the cord from last season and start looking more in earnest
Yeah.
towards
Yeah,
what's coming.
of
And
course.
yeah, and like you said, just as the season gets closer, you start thinking about the opportunity to go to games and just have the social aspect of it and enjoy it that way. Obviously, looking forward to gather round because it'll be the first one that I'm here for. I'm not going to all the games, but going to a few and going to enjoy the Barossa one with you as well. And that's
Yeah.
going to be lots of
Yeah.
fun. Still just surreal to be talking about an AFL game in my home area. Like it's just cool.
Yeah, I
Um,
know. Yeah, it's cool.
but yeah, just especially with some of, yeah, as you said, the new toys as well, like seeing Lukosius at training, seeing actually what he looks like in person. Because I don't think I'd ever can't think of any. I think Gold Coast is one of those random teams I may not have actually seen in person. I maybe have seen them once, but I
Yeah. Yeah, I
think just
definitely have.
I actually don't know if I have. It's just a random one that I've always missed.
Yeah.
We played them over in China once or twice.
Of course. Yeah.
And then
I don't know if he'd been recruited yet though.
no, I don't think. But I'm just actually
Yeah.
just talking more in general. Like, obviously, I've spent a lot of time overseas as well, so there's been a lot of times missed there. When I was only going to maybe 6 games a year a few years back, Gold Coast, if that would be one of the ones I wouldn't choose to go generally. Like
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
pick and
Yeah.
choose. I'd go to obviously Home Showdown and a few other bigger ones, and sometimes it'd just be the ones that worked out with my work schedule, being I work weekends a bit. So yeah, I actually don't think I've ever seen Gold Coast play. So I certainly hadn't seen Lukosius in person. So seeing him in person kind of got that excitement going as well. Seeing him and Rosie together, I was like looking for the little signs of their friendship when I was down there at open training, and like, yeah. So all that stuff kind of got me excited past that some of that negativity that ended the season with whether it be the finals losses and then it was just all that stuff that surrounded the Dan Houston trade and how Port got screwed and how did Port let this happen, all that stuff that the media fans were a part of it, but the media actually led a lot of that too. They kind of led.
Oh
Then,
yeah.
but then it came to draft night and everyone went, "Wow, Port did well. Did they know what
Wow,
they were
Port's
doing?"
done great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We commented on that though,
Yes,
yeah,
we
at
did
the end
at the
of
time.
our 2024 season.
Yeah.
It's funny how shit like that works.
So yeah, I do have a bit of trepidation for this season, but I think with the Ken Hinkley decision actually done now, there's a weight. I'm certain there's a weight off of some shoulders there. I'm sure it's still going to come up at times if we have a bad patch. Like, should they have done it sooner? And like, who cares? It's done now. We know what's happening. Um, with between that and some of the new players coming in, there is a little bit more of an excitement and relaxed excitement for me. I do want, obviously, I am very passionate and want the ultimate success every year. So I am still nervous about how we might go in what I think will be another tight year for the top eight and for teams fighting for position in that. But some of that trepidation I was feeling maybe a few weeks back is still there, but it's being a little bit more evened out with some excitement for certain things that I'm
Hmm.
sure we'll get into. Um, so yeah, it's a weird feeling. I don't feel as confident as I have some years, but I don't feel as negative as I have some years in there either. It's just a little bit of
Yeah, yeah.
an
It's a
unknown.
season of wonder.
Yeah, which is in of itself provides some opportunities and excitement. So yeah, it's a weird place to be, but it's and maybe it's just a little bit of age as well that I'm just too. I don't have enough energy to get so
Yeah.
angry about things
It's a
that
bit
I
of
can't.
self-protection.
Yeah, like I am going with a mindset with a lot of things in life that I can only control what I can control. That's just a mental health thing I'm doing is just like, if there's something that
Yeah,
don't get
very
too pissed
healthy,
off.
good mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, just like don't get too pissed off about things that, although some Liverpool results of late have tested that. Spending a
Well, yeah.
spend an entire day stewing about a late equalizer in the Merseyside derby, and I'm saying like w walking through my day, going control what you can control, and then the other side of my brain goes, no, fuck that, that was bullshit. That referee should have blown the whistle earlier. So, it works sometimes.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you should say that because obviously, yeah, as soon as we start seeing umpires pay one call at one end of the ground differently to the other, I'm sure the
Oh,
emotions will take over. But in saying that, there's no Charlie Dixon, so uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Who are we going to go? Oh, Charlie never gets those. 'Cause, well, he's not around anymore. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that the old third team on the day type areas, yeah, that I'm sure will get the tempers flaring. And even though, yeah, control the controllables, that ethos tends to go out the window sometimes in those situations.
Yeah. It's more it's a little bit of like what Tim Geneva says, you can be like give yourself 24 hours and then you have to get past it. I think
Yeah,
that's where
yeah.
I'm trying to like get that good night's sleep after a bat. Like if there's a bad game, like yeah, I stew about it for a bit, but like that Liverpool example again, the next morning I woke up and I was like, all right, I'm better a little bit. Like I'm still pissed off about it, and you never do forget those results, but I do the 24-hour thing and the control matching those things up a little bit does help. But yeah, I will inevitably be yelling at an umpire pretty quickly this season. So, um,
We
as
won't be alone,
yeah,
at least.
exactly, yeah, yeah, positive affirmation from fellow fans around me is always good. Um, yeah, so I guess it's a good as you started talking about no Charlie Dixon. It's probably as good a time as any to start talking about. I think the in-depth part of, and I know a lot of the little threads of how we're feeling will inch out of this, but our lines, going through the lines, and obviously, first of all, I know you have talked about having a best 23 on your page. I've looked at one
Mhm.
and I've had a few ideas. I don't even know if I'm settled yet, but I feel like you're a little bit more confident on it. So I'm gonna let you tell me your best 23. I'll let you know where I differ if I do at all, because we've had a surprising amount of Yahtzees over the over our time already, and some of
Yes,
these
we
little
did.
things we do. But if you give me your best 23 for 2025, now is this? I assume you're going like Todd Marshall's not a part of it because we're assuming he's out for the year. I assume is that how you've gone, or did you
Well,
got?
as you know, I wrote this or I put this together just before we went on Eddie's
Oh,
show.
which was the day we found
So
out.
in that frame of mind, yeah, it was without Marshall.
Mhm.
But I've just left it how I had it.
Okay,
So
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of six of one and half a dozen of the other. It's best
Oh.
23 without Marshall.
Yeah. No, that's
Because
probably the
obviously, yeah, there's a
yeah,
couple more pop-ups since then, injuries, that
yeah.
is.
But at least those ones aren't at the moment season ending.
That's true.
So
That is very
I
true.
think that's a good way
Yep.
to go with it. That we assume Todd won't play much part this season, so probably having him out is good. But the rest of them are all more or less in the mix for a best 23 at some point. We hope so. Yeah,
Yeah,
take
absolutely.
take it away. Take it away. I'm
Take it
interested.
away, Earl. All right, I'll start from the back line. So full back line, I've got Bergman, BZT, Logan Evans.
Hmm.
Halfback, Alir squared, Aslava Radicalier, and Kane Farrell.
Hmm.
Into the centre, I've got Jace Burgoyne, Ollie Wines, Willem Drew. First ruck, Jordan Sweet, Zach Butters, Connor Rosie. Then moving on to the forward line, I've got the half forward line as Rioli, Lukosius, Sampel Pepper. Full forward line, Georgiadis, Ollie Lord, and JHF.
Yeah.
And then that leaves my interchange bench, which I do have a slash because I'm just really uncertain how it is. But it's Burton, Sin, Joe Richards, and then I've got either DBJ or Joe Berry. Now, look, it all seems that Joe Berry's going to get selected, but we'll obviously get into that. And then I've got Travis Boak as my sub.
Hmm.
So that leaves the likes of Finlayson, Lorenz, Soldo, obviously, Visentini. Jed McEntee, Jack Whitlock out, and then either one of DBJ or Joe Berry that I've put there. So yeah, that's how I kind of see our best 23 looking,
Mhm.
provided that the best 23 are available at any given stage, which we obviously know won't be the case early doors of the season. But yeah, how does yours compare?
I was already starting to confuse because I was reading mine as you were reading yours out, and I was like, that was a bad idea because I was starting to like my brain was, as I mentioned to as I mentioned to Jamie off air, I had a
I should have
very
just done back line, center line, forward line, but yeah, I
no
broke it
no
down to the next
um
degree.
no, I love it. The one area I think that I differed was I don't have a Sava in my side in my best
Interesting.
23. I think the only difference is I basically have Lockie Jones in there in the back line.
Nice.
I just
Yeah.
I think we need like this is kind of the year
Hmm.
that we need, and I there was some of those issues we talked about last year, with first touch, second touch kind of stuff, and with him. But I think he improved those things across the year. Some of those things that people beat him down with, whether it be marking or whatnot, was actually not as bad as one.
Oh no, I think he had a good year
Yeah, I think he
overall
had
last year.
and
Yeah,
I
I've kind of actually forgot about him
yeah
in my mix, to be honest. So that's a good call.
yeah that's probably the major. I think. Can you read me your forward, like your half forward and full forward, like your forward line again?
Yeah, I'll just read him as a six. I've
Yeah,
got Rioli, Lukosius, SPP, George, Ollie Lord, and HORNE-FRANCIS.
yeah, that's pretty much the same. I think. I have Richards in there probably to start. Like I'm thinking Richards might one of Richards or one of the Joes I think might start like an
Yeah,
SPP. And I don't know if it's because I'm still worried about I don't know where SPP is at. I think both I think they're going to want to see what they've got with Joe Richards as well because he's the more
yeah,
senior player that's come in, even though he's a young in games played. I think there's been some. I think he's been reasonably impressive, but then Joe Berry's really seems to be, from all things we've seen from
yeah,
training and talk, that he's going to be right in the mix as well. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to mean. Sorry, I should have turned my. I usually put do not
yeah. And I
disturb.
mean, this isn't a round one team, obviously. Like mine's
Yeah,
got
exactly.
VCT and a
Yeah,
Sava in it.
that's where I,
So
yeah.
I didn't
Um,
want to get too pedantic about who would be starting on the ground. Rather just
yes,
the
yeah, yeah,
23 that if we had everyone to pick from. It's
yeah.
funny you should bring up Lockie Jones now because now I'm in a bit of a tailspin, which I guess is kind of maybe the balancing to that trepidation. It's like
Mhm.
we're trying to pick a best 23 and we kind of, yeah, are having to make some tough calls, which is good, I
Yeah,
suppose. Um,
particularly in the back line where we and we'll talk about it more when we do talk about the lines, but that's an area that we have some concern at the moment with injuries. But I think all going well. I think the BZT and Alir and then Bergman back there as well was a real
mhm.
like important part last year. So it's just like those are kind of my main guys, and it's just like Logan Evans is like really obviously showed up last year, and I think, and then between him and Farrell, there's like some of that run there, Burgoyne up on the wing or something like that as well. Yeah, I think those are the only major like your midfield was pretty much spot on with mine. Obviously, that's one of those areas that's kind of settled, like the one area that
Yeah.
is settled.
Yeah.
JHF starting up forward, or that's the thing. If we wanted to get pedantic, we'd have to put JHF on the bench, wouldn't we? Like,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, depending on
the
how
best
his
to win.
body is this year.
Well, he seems
Yeah,
to, as you brought up last year, it's just like he actually does like seem to like it, and he's talked about it more since that he likes starting on the
yeah,
bench because with his asthma and stuff, like it lets him settle into it and not be out there at the start when all that stuff's happening. So, but yeah, he will be an important part of that forward line as well. So yeah, we'll get into
oh,
that. But
oh yeah, absolutely.
the one I did have, the only way I could get Boak into my 23 was as the sub as well, though. That's how I got him in there,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
an
That touches
interesting.
on a point. Yeah, we raised late last year,
Mhm.
as we were kind of wrapping up our year on the pod. I mentioned it like that. I think for us to progress as a football club, we need to start transitioning, not transitioning Boki out. We need to start transitioning into the future of how our side shapes up
Mhm.
and utilizing him in a kind of different way, a bit more of a on field coach or on the bench leader, a bit like how Hawthorn did it with Jack Gunston and who was the other person that they were kind of rotating a couple of senior heads. Luke Bruce.
Yeah,
Luke
it was two
Bruce.
four. I was trying to think it was two forwards, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Luke Bruce and Jack Gunston last year. It's a similar kind of vibe. They're
yeah,
coming to the back end of their careers, but their leadership is still very valuable. And like you mentioned in Eddie's show, Boki can he defies logic and science sometimes with how he can get himself up for games. So,
mm,
um, yeah, that's kind of my basis for that selection.
yeah. And when you look at it that way, it does actually. There's a lot of talent that we've left out, like Josh Sin. As much as I've talked about him constantly, I think, like, because I really rate him, but he's not in my
Hmm.
starting best 23 at the moment.
He's on
Guys
my
like,
bench
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Finlayson is one that's like not there for me either. But I think he may have a role to play, particularly with some of the injuries we've had. There's a lot of talk today on the socials about him playing down back and maybe getting tested down back a little bit in training. I
Yeah.
haven't seen too much about that beyond people talking about it today on Twitter and whatnot. But whether I don't know if he has the ability. Like, there's a temperament you need to go down back, I think, which maybe they've worked with him on that this year. I'm not sure about him down back, but maybe. But he's going to be, he might get a role because he can play that second ruck role, which is going to be
Hmm.
important. But with Dixon out, we need someone that, as much as I trust Jordan Sweet to handle a pretty heavy load, you still need to have the pinch hit guy. Maybe Asava can do a bit of that as well if he gets into the side. But again,
Yeah.
my best 23 doesn't have Asava in it at the moment, but I think he will get some play. Obviously, with Zerk Thatcher's looking like,
Mm.
he's missing a few weeks to start the season. So all of those kind of best 23 things go out the window a little bit already, even though it's a good experiment to play. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, with the big thing to see is going to be with how that best 23 goes is how the likes of Richards and Berry go, because they're going to be pushing for roles that the likes of, and Darcy Byrne-Jones might be able to swing back again, but we know that didn't go well last year, even though he's an All-Australian back there. Um,
Mm.
and then Sam Pepper's there as well. So there's some good talented players. One's an All-Australian, another one that we really love in SPP that could be fighting for spots with some of these ones coming in as well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, it's going to be
Well,
really
did we
interesting.
want to go into the lines then on that note before
Yes,
we
yeah,
discuss every player?
yeah. I know. Yeah, right. Um, yeah, we'll have to. It'll be interesting to see. Might be a fun experiment to do, and I'm just going to make a note of this in my notes now. Um, Go back at the end of the year and see how much our best
Mm.
23 at the end of the year is what we think it is at the end of the year as well. So Um, yeah, it's an interesting to look at. And it's funny doing that experiment actually made me feel better about the list. Even though I still think there's some, it's all
That
depends.
exactly. That was my thoughts before. Yeah.
Yeah, doing like there's still some of those players like Lockie Jones. I put him in hoping he's going to keep progressing a bit better. And like if he just never gets better than he is now, then he's not the player that I want in there. But I'm assuming there's going to be improvement with him. Same with likes of Ryan Burton. I'm hoping he gets back to some of his best stuff as well, which we know is a pretty good player. So yeah. Um, the Lions, then, I guess probably I think it's pertinent to start with the defense because that's probably the most talked about one so far
Hmm.
in the last few weeks with the injuries that have hit to both, Brandon Zerk Thatcher with a back injury, which is always concerning to me. And that means he's going to be out for a little while.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, Tom Cleary just suffered the fate of a bad back.
yeah.
It's just like, no, not someone else. Is there a curse?
Yeah. Particularly the guy like Zerk Thatcher that really surprised us last year and came in and gained a lot of our trust pretty quickly after a few,
Yeah.
yeah, and throughout the year was quite had a good partnership with Aaliyah down there once we kind of unfortunately had to brought Asava out of there a little bit to let them work together a bit better. Asava's and then so we get the news that Zerk Thatcher is injured for a while. It's like, oh well, I guess
Hmm.
we might have to think about making sure Asava's working down there, and then he's got an injury and is fighting. He's um like a possibility to be available for round one, but it still
Yeah.
isn't still concerning that he's battling some injury to get into round one. So that's what's opened up the questions about Jeremy Finlayson today on Twitter, and obviously the likes of who else can partner Aaliyah down there and be that second fiddle to him, and then how we play around that to protect them as well, because we know a lot of our best defensive efforts comes from like the our ability to control what's coming in as well. But yeah,
Hmm.
how are you feeling about? I guess I've talked about it on. I can't remember if I talked about it on Eddie's or Craig's Yank on the Footy, which I think
Craig. Yeah.
came out today. I need to share that, but I've often talked about our defense as a house of cards area because it is just and it's more about Aaliyah. Once Aaliyah goes, it's been thankfully knock on wood he's okay at the moment, but it's an area that's actually been served us pretty well last year when we
It's
were
actually
playing.
been a decent line,
Yeah,
like most years.
but then it
It's
stresses
just
me out
some
as
of those,
well.
yeah, some of those bad games, or stereotypical Ken Hinkley games that detractors seem to get stuck into. As we mentioned on a few occasions last season, there's generally more to the story
Mm,
about a team breakdown rather than just a defensive breakdown. So, in saying that, because we finished in the top six for defense, like points against last year,
mm,
I think we generally do most years, to be honest. So I believe in our defensive structure. There hasn't been a lot of change, which is good. Obviously, there's the most notable uh, piece that was moved on or requested a trade, however you want to see it. And that obviously got a lot of headlines, but the core unit is still there.
mm.
Um, so I guess, yeah, the Asava talking point, because I've got him in my best 23. I think that he was recruited for that purpose,
Mm.
and it would be a very about face move to keep him forward where he ended last year, which was a needs based
Yeah.
magnet shift. Um, Another preseason, and people tend to forget that while it wasn't necessarily pretty, we did come into the mid-season bye last year at 8-4 and in the top four. And then after the mid-season bye is when some of the injuries around the ground started to impact, like Marshall. Ollie Lord wasn't getting any better with his injuries and form as a result. So then we had to shift to Sava around, and it worked for a little bit, and then it fizzled out.
Hmm.
I think with another preseason, and by all accounts, he's been training in the back line for all of the preseason. They're obviously, yeah, working on that synergy because we mentioned last year that to bring in all these new players, they've got to gel, and
Mm.
it's not the easiest thing to do in the world. And many clubs would attest to that. So now another preseason, uh, hopefully a bit more connection between some of those taller pieces, which seem to be getting in each other's way sometimes last year. Um, but obviously, there is space there early in the season. And I think we've kind of had to manage with a less than tall backline. And I can't remember at what stage last season we mentioned it, but Miles Bergman and Logan Evans are the same height at
Mm.
189 centimeters, which we mentioned is the same height as Tom Jonas, who was always mentioned as the third tall in our
Mm.
previous back unit, going back a few years and playing taller than what they are, which Bergman in particular, but Evans in tandem showed that they're capable. So, and Alir finished last season fantastically well. His second half of the year in particular was
all
amazing
all Australian
as that
form for
general.
me. I think like if
Yeah,
he'd played a
yeah.
bit more of the season at that level, which is partly probably just from trying to find that synergy. I think he could have been an All Australian again last year if things had gone differently. But um, yeah, he was in imperious form, and thankfully he seems to be fit this preseason again. Again, just knocking on my table to
Hmm.
the pod
Yeah.
tradition. Yeah, knock on all the wood. Um, yeah, no, yeah, it's th that's the sneaky thing about, as you mentioned, those other talk like the Bergmans and the Evans is like people cry about the cry that sounds like really negative, but just their concerns about the defense is actually some of those guys are sneaky tall and play tall as well. Like we've seen Bergman with his
Yeah.
marking ability, he really does play
Hmm.
quite tall with good reach, good hops. And
It was
Evans,
shown last year against the Western Bulldogs in that interesting period of the year in
mm,
and around that Brisbane loss. And then yeah, it was a couple of weeks later we played the Bulldogs and their tall forward line was obviously quite noteworthy. It is quite noteworthy, but leading into that game, and I think Bergman did a job on. It was either Ugelhagen or Darcy or what have you, but played on them without fault.
mhm,
We found just to further your point just then.
yeah. I think we're seeing a little bit of just there's a thing happening in the AFL where forward lines are a touch more athletic, maybe not quite as tall. Like
Yeah,
if you get those
yeah.
big tall forwards, like you've got Carlton play with because they've got Harry Mackay and Charlie Kerner, they're really good, big, more traditional, but they're still more athletic than some in the past. But you're seeing some forward lines go smaller, and then that allows that a defense with the likes of Bergman and like you don't need to have, you know, we can play with those kind of guys who are still actually quite tall, but they're more athletic and have that
Hmm.
ability to play on those athletic kind of mid-sized forwards or and then if yeah, and then you can and then you deal with the small forwards around there as well. But yeah, it's just the AFL is a more athletic sport. It's not just man on man stuff. So you have to have guys that while they've got reasonable, range as far as their ability to defend the ball coming in and defend one on one, they also have to be that there's that more athletic, dynamic range to them needed as well, and that's what some of these guys provide. So, and we don't play a style where we let guys like we try to we play more of an intercept game down there anyway. I mean, there is would be interesting to see how the game plan changes this year because there is already talk about how the forward line is operating differently in preseason because they're changing how they do it because of, and I can hear all the
Yeah.
Port fans going, "Thank fuck!" like,
About
as
time.
much as we loved Charlie and all, but we I think we recognized sometimes when it didn't work, and that was more just, and again, it's not to blame Charlie, it's just like that was the target down there, and um, but yeah, there's changes to how they're trying to move the ball a little bit and move and let their forwards play up a bit higher and try to get the ball to them that way. So yeah, how that changes how we defend as well will be interesting. But yeah, we like to play that intercept game, keep Aaliyah a bit freer if we can to be able to play his best game. He doesn't like to be he can defend one on one sneakily well at
He
times,
can. Yeah, yeah.
but he
I don't
doesn't
actually
want
like
to.
it.
That's when
Yeah,
he gets in. That's when he looks like he's about to get injured sometimes because he falls
yeah,
over someone.
to be
Yeah.
honest, I don't think he fucking cares. I think a lot is made about him preferring to be the loose man.
Mm.
I think that's his optimal role, but I think he's just as like if he's given a job to defend one on one, I think he's more than capable defender one on one, and B, I think he relishes it. It's just another challenge for him.
Yeah.
Um,
He
yeah,
does
but
have
a
a good.
lot does get spoken about externally how he can't not necessarily can't defend one on one, but he doesn't like to. It kind of paints him in a
Mm.
bad light a little bit. Yeah, I don't buy into it.
Yeah, you see when he gets into those one on ones, he really battles. And someone who doesn't like to do that, like you can just, I mean, just the way he carries himself as a footballer and as a player and as a leader in our
Yeah.
defense is not someone that's going to down tools in any situation. Nor is he going to is he going to be salty about having to do a job. Like he's a defender and a key defender and an All Australian defender. He knows his role as a defender, like in any sport. It's a little bit selfless. You don't get to be like he is a star and has been recognised as such
Yeah.
by Port fans and the wider AFL as well. So he's a star defender, but and the AFL does recognise star defenders, but you still do have to do a lot of dirty work, and some of that comes
Hmm.
down to one-on-one defending, which he is a lot better at than some people give him credit for. It's just sometimes when he gets in one-on-ones, that's usually a sign of a breakdown somewhere. So that's usually the reason I think it's
Yeah.
looked at negatively
Leaves
is
him
like,
compromised.
yeah,
Yeah.
if he's in a one-on-one and it's kind of like if he gets beaten and it's a goal, like it just means something has gone wrong elsewhere. Um, but sometimes it's just what you have to do, and he has got a pretty good, like, he either gets a spoil in there, or he just gets the
Yeah.
right, gets goal side of the defender and just makes it a hard opportunity. So yeah, he can play, but yeah, with I think our defense got 1,000 times better with Bergman down there last year as well, which you were hot on. You were hot on
100%.
before it happened, and then once it happened, you said, "This is
100%.
why. This is why." um,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's
And
going to
the
be.
inclusion of Evans just
Oh,
was a match made in heaven.
I love
As he
him. I'm so
warmed into the
excited to.
spot.
Yeah.
Mm.
I haven't properly. He got 22 for the number
He
changed.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got
Speaking of Charlie, yeah.
yeah. And got it from giving over like Flip as well. So it was really cool to just kind of see all of that, the number stuff. We can talk about that. And I don't have them in front of me, but that was just a cool one to see that he's already,
Yeah.
yeah, upgraded the number to a more like you're part of the squad now. Not that we ever had a doubt after a few games last
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I know what you
um,
mean. Yeah.
yeah, really excited to see him down there. But yeah, I mean, Bergman, obviously, he's got there's some other extracurriculars hanging over him just as far as his future situation as a Port Adelaide player goes. Um, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of year he has. Certainly not casting any aspersions about how his attitude will be. I think he's a fantastic bloke and will
Yeah.
play as hard as ever. But I wonder what, because the talk was that he wants to play more up the field, but his best role and where he's best suited and where he actually excels as a footballer is playing that roll down back. Last year,
Yeah.
he became. You and I think, talked about at times in the first half of the year, just some games where we just didn't notice him. Like the game kind of
Yes.
went
Yeah.
past
We
him,
did.
and then once he went down back, it was like you did not stop noticing him. And he still and we know from Dan Houston's experience that Miles, as a backman, you can still spend plenty of time up the field and have some pretty damn good goal scoring opportunities as well if you play it right. So yeah, he could kind of, and he's got that like fairly good disposal efficient. Like he can be a very handy
Yeah.
player. His disposals, kicks, he's got a good kick on him. Obviously, no one's going to be Dan Houston, but I think Bergman can. Yeah, what that means for his future as a Port Adelaide player, like I don't need to go into it too much more now, but that is a part of his story for this season a little bit. But yeah, I think he's going to be the real one to watch as to how that defense goes. Like he could make
Here's
himself.
the glue.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how we kind of eventuated, his position eventuated. Yeah, it was a bit of the glue that held everything together at times. Funnily enough, after talking about Aaliyah, who's a similar sentiment with him, he's the general, but
Mm,
Bergman just seemed to mesh everyone together.
mm,
We looked a lot more sound when he moved back, uh, and I expect another fantastic year from him.
yeah.
But
He's
coming
got
out of the back line,
mm,
uh, like you said, obviously Kane Farrell will have a higher amount of responsibility in that regard. You
mm,
mentioned the apparent change in game plan. If that's a holistic thing across every line or what, but yeah, I doubt that. It'll be interesting to see with the preseason games coming up, how much they attack the corridor because kicking it up the guts, it's forever and a day been the the favoured path to goal. It's nothing new, just the fashion that we did it with a Dan Houston outside last
we were
year. Uh,
aggressive through the middle, and
yeah,
it was
yeah.
highlighted in every game by commentators. Was like, oh, here they go again. They're aggressive,
Mm.
and it worked to our
He took the
credit.
piss with some of those kicks that he took as well, and they paid
Yeah,
off. So,
yeah,
yeah, why wouldn't
absolutely.
you? So it'll be interesting to see how, yeah, our other ball users, because speaking of Houston in that way, kind of puts him up here and everyone almost in the basement when we have actually got a lot of good kicks
Mm,
coming out of the back line. I think we even mentioned it a lot of the time in our review, just some of the stat lines, noticing the disposal efficiency was generally highest with a lot of our defenders, not only Dan Houston,
mm.
which is important because we need to get it the fuck out of there.
Yeah, I actually did
um,
have the disposal efficiency. I'm just looking through my notes from when I was on Craig's podcast. I just let's um it's not as easy to find as I thought it was going to be. This is live podcasting. Effective disposals per game. So yeah, Kane Farrell actually slightly edged Houston, and then yeah, it was Aaliyah. So
Hmm.
our top five for the year, yeah, no, top five because Will Lorenz is actually top, but he only played 2 games, so it doesn't really count. Um, Kane Farrell was first essentially for players that played more than 20 games. Then Houston, then Aaliyah, then Lockie Jones, then Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, and then Sava Radicalizia.
Is this just pure disposal efficiency?
Effective disposals percentage, yeah, per game. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
there
every
you
single
go.
one of those players are defenders, and obviously, what you can talk about Asava playing up forward a bit, but a lot of his effective disposals probably were the ones that happened down back. So yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, and Bergman is next after that as well. So so yeah, the top seven were all players that were just from that back line, and one of those in Bergman down the list a little bit there a bit, but we're talking 5% between first and seventh. So yeah,
Yeah.
and Josh Sin after Bergman, by the way, obviously played a lot less games, but that's kind of one. I guess one we can just say like I down at that
I'm
open,
big. I'm big on him.
yeah,
Yeah, I
down at
think he'll
that.
have a point to prove.
Yeah, and just a note from that open training I was at, he was dinking around a few nice kicks, and I actually had I was videoing. I went back and watched the video. I was like, you can't really hear it on the video, but there was a dad talking to his kid behind me, as I was just videoing. Josh didn't have a really good moment in kind of the ball came back in to the defensive 50, and Sin ran back, gathered it, and just laced a nice kick out to the wing. And he'd already done a nice inboard kick, like kind of one of those aggressive into the corridor a little bit kind of kicks earlier in this open
Nice.
open training
Yeah. Keep
scrimmage, and
talking.
yeah. And yeah, the dad to his kid behind me went, "Oh, he could be the Dan Houston replacement." Now that's like putting big raps on him, and certainly don't
Yeah.
want him to be having that kind of expectation on his shoulders. But it was nice to see others kind of seeing that Josh Sin has that ability, and just seeing that kind of positive affirmation in the stands at open training. But yeah, he's kind of one that we're, obviously isn't in best 23s, but he's one that's right there in the wings, like really, really knocking on the door, um, to be another one of those players that can maybe play that kind of role, like whether it be like Farrell, like injuries are going to happen this season. It's inevitable, whether it's Farrell, hopefully,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Farrell's coming back from an injury, like at the end of last season as well. He was when I was down at that open training. He was still running around with the
Mm.
with the guy. Like I think it was Farrell, Vicentini, Soldo, a couple of
Soldo.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's about three or four that are running around away from the main group. Farrell was one of them. He was moving reasonably well. He's just running, cutting a lot of laps. There's just not any hard sprints or anything. There's just a lot of running and
Yeah.
cardio and laps, and so he's still recovering. Clearly, like I'm assuming he's going to be fine for preseason and all that. And I think that was alluded to on that day when they had Chad Corns. Actually, I do have the video. I did video the entire Chad Corns chat at the end of that. I might pop it up on the Patreon or something. So for those that listening that are on Patreon, I might pop that up there. It's just a 4 minute video of Chad talking after that 22nd of January one. So it's probably still a bit old now, but you can kind of see what they were. And it was essentially saying like all these guys are going to be back in the main mix pretty soon. So no worries about round one. But Farrell is
Hmm.
still coming back from injury. So that's always a concern, particularly for guys that play like him, and he's had a few little soft tissue things over the years. So um, yeah,
ACL.
yes, the ACL as well.
As well.
Yeah, my wife had a knee done by the same guy that did Kane Farrell's ACL because
That's right. Yeah.
she told me she came out of the doctor's office and said, "Oh, he's the one that did Kane Farrell's knee," and I was just like, "Well, he got back pretty quickly and hasn't he's looked all right." So um,
He's only gone up from there.
yeah, and Andrea walked out of hospital the next day after having her knee done, so it's does a pretty good job. But yeah, there's some guys in the mix for that back line. Beyond that, is there anyone else? Like, it's been interesting with the.
Oh, I have I don't know if it's necessarily a smoky, even just a guy I've had my eye on
Mm,
in a way since he got drafted. There's a guy by the name of Xavier Walsh. He's
yeah.
actually a rookie listed player, but he is a tall. Oh, it's interesting. He got recruited, and I believe he was playing as a tall forward for his uh, junior side or under 18 side in Western
Mm,
Australia, I think it was. But he also played tall defender as well, coming through the ranks. And when he was drafted, he said he actually preferred being a defender. He liked to, yeah, the physicality of it. And his highlights package when he got drafted showed that he had a level of physicality and aggression about him, which I
Mm.
obviously love. And then last year he was used in defense, but I think just some teething issues, getting used to SANFL football and whatnot. As a young man, I think
Mm.
Hammer Hartlett used him as a bit of a swing man. He found himself up forward as well as defense. But I'm just interested to see his development this year, knowing that, yeah, we've obviously got a couple of early season injuries to some tall defenders. Will that spur him on to maybe even try and push for a first 23 spot? It's highly unlikely. But yeah, I kind of really want him to do well because I've liked what I've seen from him in a raw product that he is.
Mm.
And if it's been a while since we've produced a tall defender rather
Yeah.
than bringing one in. So just a note of intrigue for me on Xavier Walsh. Um, Apart from that, the kind of semi-likelies are, yeah, Will Lorenz could play a wing or a halfback, depending on injuries. Finlayson, who knows?
Mm.
In a defensive sense,
Yeah.
obviously, if we get injuries up forward, and we'll talk about that, he's obviously, yeah, well equipped there. But yeah, the Finlayson chat has been around forever and a day with Port Adelaide fans since he got brought over as a possibility for
Yeah.
cover. And he did what was it, sessions this week in the back line. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if they'll pull that trigger. I'm not sure if he would actually want to do it.
Mm.
While he would say he'll do whatever the team needs, particularly if it gets him on the field. Yeah, like we've kind of discussed with our best 23 or like our best starting six or whatever, we've covered quite well over the last 12 months in particular
Mm.
without the need to just go, oh, we've got tools out. We need to just get whatever tools we can. Because yeah, we've literally just discussed how we can cover for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, some of those on the periphery. I mean, I have Sin on my bench, so he'll go in my rotation,
Yes. Yeah.
hypothetical
Yeah.
rotation.
Yeah.
So I don't think DBJ will be going back at all.
No.
And sorry, sorry. Before I move on from that quick point,
Mm.
his All Australian year was, yeah, 5 years ago or 4 years ago and change. So that
Mm.
ship has sailed. He was our best goal involvement player last year. He is getting on. We've got some dynamic inclusions. Senior leadership is pretty important, though, in my opinion, and of the opinion of a lot of people in sport and in Aussie rules football. So, yeah, but I still doubt we'll see him down back. If DBJ is down back, we're in a pretty dire spot, in my opinion.
Yeah. I.
And then the other one would be Ryan Burton, who's on my interchange bench.
Mm.
He'll have a point to prove. He went away again in the off season. He just really, really needs to get his body right.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he has as much explosive power as he did when we recruited him. But he needs to find a way because he's in that bracket that needs to be in our best 2023.
And his age profile is still of someone that should be
That's what I mean.
playing. Like
Yeah.
he's what 26 now, I think, maybe.
I think he's a little bit older than
Yeah,
that,
maybe
but
27, but yeah,
he's still in that bracket where he needs to be playing first 23 football.
yeah. Oh, geez, he's
First
28 now.
22, really.
28. Yeah, to be fair, I forget that the 2020 prelim when he got injured and was thrown up full forward basically
Forward, yeah.
was 5 years ago because I keep thinking of him as that 23-year-old and I guess a 22-year-old maybe at the time. Um, but or yeah, no, 23. Math ain't mathin'. It's 2 weeks in a row now. But yeah, I like the Walsh shout though. Like as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, I think he's going to say Walsh. Yeah, 100 like 195 centimeter, 19-year-old. We all know that tools traditionally take a little bit longer to develop.
Yep,
So I
100%.
think he's contracted through the end of 2026. So Port have given him a couple of years with them saying, look, we think you've got something. Like, let's give you a couple of years, and yeah, like you said, if he, some guys can just find that rhythm a little bit quicker, and he could, yeah, if we do have some continual issues down there, and he has a good start to the Sandful year, then he might find himself in line for a spot, and yeah, certainly his height and kind of his ability. That's what we were just talking about. Height isn't the be all and end all, but if you do have 195 centimeters
No,
to
but
work
there's
with,
opportunity
yeah,
potentially.
yeah,
And sometimes that's all you need. And tools develops, yeah, on a different trajectory to others, like you mentioned. But for a young guy, hopefully the kind of innate aggression bridges that gap a little bit.
yeah,
As now he's done another preseason with our squad.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Couple of
I just really
preseasons in
like
now.
what I've seen from him.
Mm.
I think he got suspended early in the year last year in the SNFL, which, obviously don't condone suspendable actions, but it just showed the kind of
Depends what
mongrel
it
or fire that
depends
he
what it
has.
is. You won't
Yeah.
find too many
Yeah.
Liverpool fans that will have anything like. I don't think Curtis Jones has to buy a beer in Liverpool for a year after
Liverpool. Yeah, yeah.
going after that Everton player that was giving it to our fans, and Curtis Jones just got himself a straight red for going after him. So yeah, yeah, no, I don't condone any violence at all, but talk about it with me at the pub off air and. um, yeah, unless there's anything else to defensive side, I think
Nah,
maybe
that's all
go,
from me.
yeah, maybe go forward line and then we'll finish off with the middle. I think,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
um,
that's fine with me. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, the forward line, obviously, some I guess monumental changes to what we've been for 8 years. Charlie Dixon retiring, and now Lobethul's best player. So he's gone. Massive, obviously the point of attack for us for a long time. Maybe controversially so for some sections of fans, but he was an All-Australian forward at one point, and when he was fit a few years ago, he was a really dominant forward in this league, and
hmm
it is a big miss and change, but it also is a promotion of opportunity first to Todd Marshall, but then of course he tragically does his Achilles in early preseason. Thankfully, maybe it's hard to say thankfully in this, but in the context of it, that it was early enough that we have a fair bit of time to try to work towards what we can do now with Todd Marshall out of the
Yeah.
picture for this year. Um, Lukosius in, Joe Richards in, Joe Berry drafted in, and obviously when we talked about on Eddie's podcast, just because it was so early, I was just like, I don't know if either of those guys play round one, but as preseasons developed, it seems like one or both of like at least one of them will play round one. Joe Berry's getting a lot of love, and understandably so. He was highly rated in the draft. Obviously, the
Mm.
Robbie Gray there to do the picking kind of connection, and everyone nostalgic. Which shout out to Robbie Gray.
There was a
Yeah.
few punters who still weren't happy with it in the moment, but
I
yeah,
think
he
that
might
was
make
more
them look a bit
the
silly across the year.
I think that was more that people don't understand how the draft works sometimes, like the trading up and down, and like understanding that
Yeah.
because they're like, why did we trade
Yeah.
when they picked next anyway and wanted their guy? And it was just like, no, because Frio we're gonna trade with them instead, and then we're gonna come up and grab him because people were like, oh, West Coast have the next pick anyway and have who they want. And I think it was West Coast, and but it was because Frio were actually,
Frio,
if
yeah.
we didn't do the trade, Frio were going to do the trade. So West Coast basically
Mm.
said, if you want him, you need to trade with us instead. So that
Yeah.
was the mechanics of it, but people just didn't read into it enough, I think. Um, and then there was
Shock.
and then there was the occasional ones that wanted us to take a tool defender or something at that point
Yeah.
because that's what we needed.
Or a tool forward
Yeah,
first.
and I think there was some that actually said we should take Jack Whitlock with their first pick, and we ended up getting him down at
Yeah.
pick 33 anyway. So, but yeah, there's a lot of our forward line has had some massive changes to it in the off season. Lukosius's name has come up in the talks with the defense but I'm just completely reticent. Like I don't want to see that happen. We've brought him in as a
It's just not
forward.
happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think he's come to play as a forward. Now I think Lukosius is probably going to be happy to be back home in SA, back playing with his best mate, who's his captain now, and I don't think he's going to unsettle the boat if we put him down there. But I just don't think you, if you want to develop Lukosius to be part of this forward line for the next 6 to 8 years, um, you can't
Playing
start him.
forward.
Yeah, you can't start him by going, well, we're having some trouble down back, so you can go down there for a while, and eventually we'll get there. So it's like, no, you need to just say he's a forward. Don't consider it because his skill set. The reason you can consider Finlayson is because you don't. He's not. Finlayson isn't the caliber of player that we think Lukosius can be. There's no
Yeah.
disrespect to Finlayson, and Finlayson's had some great. I mean, he kicked 40 odd goals in that year that GWS went to the grand final in 2019. Finlayson's had some great years for us as well, but he's not. Lukosius has been a highly touted player in his early years. He could be. He's kind of one of those players. No one's ever going to sit there and go, Finlayson could be an All Australian. Again, I'm sure it sounds like I'm really being disrespectful to Finlayson, but I'm just trying to.
Finlayson's fighting for a
He's,
spot rather than Lukosius, who has been
yeah,
recruited for a purpose.
exactly.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and Lukosius has been recruited for the purpose of being part of our new forward line for the next, as I said, 6 to 8 years. At least the next 5 years, and then because he's still relatively young. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's funny seeing that everyone go, well, did that at Gold Coast, and so it's like, well, no, but we can't just react to, and especially when you talk about the players that we do, some of those things we can move. Yeah, I don't, Xavier Walsh, if he's coming into the back line early on, then it means we're having a fair defensive crisis, but we still do have those magnets to move before we go to
Yeah.
throwing.
Structure is still important.
Yeah. And if you can't and you want to make sure that Lukosius settles into that forward line pretty quickly, which I think he will. But yeah,
Well, and we'll
how are you
probably
feeling
see
about it all?
him.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just on Lukosius, to continue on from that,
Mm,
we probably will see him west offing it and chopping out down
mm,
back, potentially if there's a tight game, a tight finish to a game, and we need an extra marking option down back, and a sure kick to
mm.
exit while the heat is on late in games. We'll definitely see him like around the wing region, just how AFL football's played these days. Like,
Yeah.
it's not, you're not stuck in your spot. Players move around the field.
We see that from Todd
But he's
Marshall
he's
and
playing as a
Mitch and all
forward.
those last year. Yeah, all
Yes,
of the
yeah,
even Charlie, Todd, all those guys
yeah.
moved a fair way up the field. And yeah, we'll see more of the same. It's just that's modern AFL.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I guess this is a really good exercise to kind of level out the trepidation that we spoke about because, like, I look at that. I mean, Ollie Lord has kind of been in the media. He had an interview this morning with SEN SA. He went to the Barossa for a community clinic,
Mm,
and he was interviewed on the Port Socials with that. I just love the way he carries himself as a person, first and
yeah.
foremost. Always seems quite intellectual and prepared. Um, I think he'll have a point to prove because, by all accounts, he was round one last year, guaranteed 100% round one, ready to make an impact. Obviously, his leg injury set him well back.
Mm,
So he'll have a point to prove. SPP coming back in, like, I just think in the back of my mind that he's just absolutely going to run riot for some reason this year. He seems to be in a very good place personally,
mm.
professionally. His body looks tip top. He's still in the leadership group. And he had an interview himself as well, where he said that last year taught him more how to lead off the field because he didn't spend that much time on it.
Mm,
But now he actually gets to do what we all love, and that's play SPP frenetic pressure football. And
mm.
I'm looking forward to that almost more than anything, to be honest. Maybe apart from JHF season as a whole,
Yeah.
uh, who I've also got in my forward line, just purely for the fact that, yeah, if he's not on the bench, he's kind of starting or resting forward and then rotating through the midfield. So
Mhm.
I look at our forward line. Georgiades has expressed the fact that he wants to be the man now that Charlie's gone. Like that's just more of that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
and I think more so because we know that he's capable. He'll probably get a bit more attention, but who knows? With Lord there,
Well, and
Lord
look,
commands a tall defender
he
rather
does.
than um, Georgiades just getting the best defender because Charlie's gone. If we shape up with Lord in the team, I think that'll balance our forward line out. Um, Willie Rioli showed us on many occasions last year how bloody good he is.
Mm.
Hopefully, he's had a bit of a better preseason because um, maybe his body kind of left a bit on the table in certain games, but then he tore it up in others, and we relished that in some
Yeah.
of our reviews of games.
Looked good,
Um,
looked good at Malik. Again, I've only been to the one open training, but Willie looked yeah, there was a couple of those drills where they go one on one, like with a
it's just
defender
per
with
possession
a
for him and
yeah.
for me. Like with Rioli, the amount of possessions that he gets is immaterial. It's we know what he can do per possession, which
Mhm.
excites me the most.
Yeah, you can have six
And banging
disposals
in a few
and
goals. Yeah.
six disposals and three goals, and then lay like two tackles in a game, and you think he's had a 20 disposal game just because you've just seen him harry and like, sometimes it's not even he doesn't get there's not even a tackle stat. It's maybe a pressure act and that's it. But he does something down that
Mm,
forward line, and again as a small forward, like he makes you have to be accountable for where he is at all times because he
that's exactly right.
does
And there's
pop
a bit of
up.
a theme. There's a bit of a theme kind of propping up as we're talking is a lot of the people that we've mentioned command a bit of attention. And I
Mhm.
think that's where clubs talking about a game style shift. It's around this. And I mean, we've been hot. We've been hot on our forward lines the last couple of years, even before I joined the pod. And
Mhm.
yeah, then, the external noise says that it kind of differs a little bit from our excitement, but maybe it's a little bit of red wine after we've started talking. But yeah, there's a lot of excitement. And yeah, we mentioned the two Joes. Like you said, Berry, from a draftee point of view, has got a lot of excitement for his uh, just apparent seamless fitting into our program. And it looks likely that he's going to debut and potentially have an impact
Mhm.
fairly immediately. And then Joe Richards even got Ken's glowing praise, was at the season launch, saying that he can't believe he hasn't played more AFL
Yes.
football. And
Mhm.
he seems to be a guy with his head screwed on pretty well too. So there's obviously a goal in mind, pun not intended, with our forward line and how they've kind of recruited and shaped it up, which fills me with a lot of excitement, to be honest. Uh, I think while Marshall is injured, though, Lord, I think a lot rests on Lord being fit just for that focal point.
Mhm.
I would hate to for him to be just a plug and play Charlie replica in a focal point sense, but every team does need a tool focal point for certain plays
Yeah.
within a game. And yeah, a fantastic opportunity for him who yeah, uh, I love the way he goes about himself as a person. And unfortunately, we've only got a sample size of what he can do. Obviously, the final against Brisbane a couple of years ago is the most noteworthy.
Mhm.
But he's had some other moments in games around that where you're just scratching the surface a little bit. And I really want to see a full season of Ollie Lord just kind of breaking packs. I would like him to take more marks, more contested marks, to be honest, just command a bit more of that forward line. And I think that comes with time and sense of comfortability
Yeah.
within the structure.
It's kind of like he's still so young, like your body's still developing a little bit in those early years of your AFL career, as particularly as a tall. Yeah, once he figures out that he can command and all that stuff, like that's sometimes just figuring out like your body structure and like how you can utilize that to command. Once you figure all that stuff
Yeah.
out, then it kind of starts to just fall into place. So yeah, hopefully that's kind of the start. This year can be the start of that for Ollie. Might still come with its ups and downs, but if we see more
Yeah.
ups and downs, then that's progress. And um, he certainly showed enough. Obviously that final, but I just even remember when those first few games when he debuted, like his debut in those first few games, he missed some relatively simple set shots. That was a one letdown, but that's again, that's a growing body as a tall person. He'll figure that stuff out. This that's immaterial for me at that point. Like, I mean, if it was in a close game, it sucks that they missed a goal, but the stuff he showed as far as his combativeness, some of that little bit of he even had he had a bit of mongrel in some of in some of
Oh, he does.
in the
Yeah. Yeah.
contest as well, which I
100%.
really like. So a lot of that other stuff that he brings to the table as far as his mentality towards football, that was really encouraging to me. So yeah, if he is fit going into the season and he brings all that with him, with a year like 18 months on of development since his debut, almost 2 years at this point. Um, yeah, he is going to be lot of excitement there. And as you touched on at the start of this, I think the real wild card is the fact that JHF has really turned into your Petrarca, Bontempelli type,
Yes. Yeah.
Sitkin,
Dangerfield.
Dangerfield, Dustin Martin, all those the greats that you can think of that tear a game apart in the middle, but then can go down forward and tear the game apart down there too. We just saw it in
Yeah.
the Indigenous All Stars game on the weekend where he
Yes, we did.
was the second best player on ground. And if he hadn't put the cue in the rack halfway through the third quarter, he might have. But shout out to Jai Simkin, played an amazing game and really touching moment with his celebration for his goal for his granddad. But so no slouch on that. It was great. Side note, it was great to see Simpkin and JHF having a real friendly chat out there, which, obviously there's a little bit of the kangaroo stuff still. I think that's
Oh,
gone
of
away.
course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
For
Right.
obviously teammates and not that it was not that it's Cam Zerha who was the one really putting the barbs out there on social media after that move, but it was still nice to see. I just kind of like when I saw them together, I kind of went, oh, and kind of watched it a little bit, and they were really friendly and having a good chat. And they obviously were the two best players on the field. But yeah, JHF, a real great burst from the middle goal for his first goal in the Indigenous All Stars game from just under 50, like just inside the 50. Then he had a set shot, and then he had another one that he kind of just gathered, I think, a kick inboard to him, and he just turned around and he's starting to do those goals like that one from just under 50 when he's running. Like it's not like he puts it doesn't. He's got a real nice stabbing motion. It's like he
It
didn't
was
put
like it was nothing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just generates so much power with so little effort in those legs.
Yeah.
And
Well, the way that I interpret watching that was all he was worried about was just kicking it straight, like
yeah,
the distance or whatever. Like it just kick it and
yeah.
put it on the boot properly. Because yeah, he just already in the early parts of his career, he just knows how to play football. He knows
Mhm.
how to impact. He's a powerful footballer. And every year that goes on, the more and more that will come to the foreground. And I said it last year for any particularly, Crow supporters and whatnot, people who like to hang shit on him, North Melbourne support some of those toxic, like
Yeah.
enjoy whatever like crap you think you can hang on him now, because he is. I'm certain he is going to take the absolute piss out of sides sooner rather than later. Sooner and later, should I
Well,
say?
he did it last year.
Um,
He had some games last year and periods in games last year where it was just like when the game was running
yeah,
through him, he was running the game, and it was just like you couldn't do
mm,
anything about what he was going to
yeah.
do.
Or if we needed a spark as
Yeah.
well, he was generally the one providing it in
Mm.
some of those games.
And then he'd go down.
I yeah.
He had game winning moments as a forward too. Like he went down forward, kicked crucial goals in close games that got us either back into the game or got us over helped us get over the line. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and then he obviously can burst. Most importantly, really rip the game open in the middle. And we'll get to the midfield side of it. But he kind of is just a truly. The more you watch him, the more he grows. The more you realize he's just a generational, unique talent.
Hmm.
And the fact
Yeah.
I don't say it lightly to compare him to the likes of your Bonts and Dusties, and I'm not going to
Well,
say
you're
he's
not
going.
the only one.
Yeah, I'm not going
So
to say he's going to be Dusty, but he does. the things he can provide to the team are what Dusty provided to Richmond, which was a game-breaking midfield, but also could just go down forward and kick three without. And suddenly you're looking at it going, wait, this guy's kicked three, and he's spent half the game down forward, but then somehow he's had, 20, he's had a bunch of clearances as well. It's just like, how has he done all this in the same game? And it's just like, it's just because you can put him in these places and he will affect the game however you need him to
Yeah.
affect it.
He
Um,
puts the fear of God in opposition minds as well. It's like, oh,
yeah.
fucking hell, like, where is he? Like, how do I defend this?
hmm
Um,
And
that
he's an
aura
incredible
is,
he's an incredible
yeah,
contested mark down forward as well. Like he can body opposition defenders and get them under the ball and like just and he knows how to contest for a mark down in the forward line like quite well. So that kind of skill set, some of those marks he took last year where he'd body a defender out and yeah, just really impressive stuff. So yeah,
yeah,
him as a forward is just like if you just had JHF and he was just a forward, you'd be really excited. Like
that's it.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, I
he's kind
know.
of that wildcat, like with all those other, and again, as we've talked about it, I think we're both reasonably. There's some trepidation in the fact we just don't know what the forward line's going to look like because there is so many. There's a bunch of guys that are going to be playing in that forward line this year that haven't even played a game for Port Adelaide. So it's just like there's that unknown quantity of it that
Yeah,
we don't. And then the likes of Ollie Lord just haven't played that many games. And then your Lukosius, Richards, Berry, whoever it is, Sam Pepper hasn't played much football for a year. So there's a lot of guys that either haven't played much football for a year, haven't played much football at all, or haven't played at all for Port Adelaide. So there's all this stuff, but it's all guys that bring a lot of excitement as well, which is where the excitement comes from. It's just like it's all opportunity and new shoots of grass in front of us, which is really I find that really exciting. The closer that I get to the season, the more excited I get for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think the trepidation mostly comes with me in relation to how we get our season underway.
hmm
Because well, I've mentioned, early season wins are worth their weight in gold because everyone's shaking off the cobwebs. Season doesn't actually start to round six. It's stuff that I've said before. Obviously, for new people listening, thanks again. That's kind of where I see the AFL as a whole. Doesn't start to round six, and yeah, the biggest part of my trepidation is I hope that we're not figuring things out on the run and it's affecting our chances of win loss early in the season because by and large, like going through these lines, like there is a lot to be excited about. And by and large, I think we will be fine. I mean, even on Eddie's show, I predicted an elimination final spot, a
Mm.
hosting, so at least fifth or sixth.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't expect us to have a bad year. I just don't know if we're premiership worthy this season.
Premiership
It's
was one.
still, there's still going to be a lot of excitement along the way.
Yeah, the premiership was won last year from one of those spots in quite dominant fashion. Though a couple of comeback wins in there, but Brisbane
And it's
were,
interesting
you know,
how how some of the onlookers for training sessions have described our forward play. It does sound very similar to how Brisbane shaped up in their forward
mm,
forays last year. Funnily enough, being the premier and that old adage that everyone goes to copy the premier.
yeah,
It copies their homework
mm,
to try and catch up.
yeah, um, yeah. So, and that's yeah. As we look through the lines, like I see a team that's very capable of contending. It's just how it all kind of the synergy is the one thing that we're just not going to know until we get on the field. And certainly
Yeah.
this week, even though it's just a preseason match and none of them, you can get spanked in a preseason match and still go on and win a premiership pretty well. So, not that you can take everything out of it, but it will be interesting to see just some of those early signs of growth, like what we're doing in a match sim situation. Unless you have anything else on the forward line, it's probably since we started teasing towards it with JHF anyway.
Yeah, no, I think we should
Might
move
as
on
well,
now. Yeah.
yeah. Look at the middle of the ground. Yeah. Uh, it's probably the one area we just go, geez, we've got an abundance of talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
stacked.
But the buzz cut crew, yeah. I mean, now we're going into this year for the first time in a few years, probably. Um, we have a ruckman that we know is our first ruckman, in Jordan
Yeah.
Sweet.
No, we can compete at the level.
Yeah.
He
Hopefully.
can perform around the ground.
Mhm. He's a Port Adelaide fan and he loves the club and all like just there's
Yeah.
lots of stuff to get the warm
Yeah.
and fuzzies going. But
Played under
so
Josh Carr at North Adelaide.
mhm.
Side note.
Start the car. Um, yeah, no, but pretty. I mean, I don't know where. I don't even know where to start in this group. Like, I mean, we assume, yeah, with everyone fit, like Butters and Rosie are just going to carry on their merry way. Like Butters had an incredible year last year. There were some periods of time, like Rosie had an indifferent year just because of injury and whatnot. But I overall, I think you and I agree that he actually captained the club pretty well.
Yeah.
There were some detractors out there, but without wanting to be too critical of those detractors. I think that was just misplaced frustration with Rosie
Maybe a bit
rather
of
than.
sheepism as well.
Yeah, exactly. So with those two, I'm pretty confident in those two leading the club, and Willem Drew and Sam Pepper are part of the. And shout out to Will. How have we gotten almost 2 hours into a podcast and not talked about Willem Drew yet?
Well, and he had a press conference, was it yesterday too, that I watched whilst doing the dishes.
And mate,
I don't know. That,
I
not that that's
assume,
relevant,
I,
but
s- well, I
yeah, he
assume it
kept me
made.
company.
I assume it made the dishes a far better experience than it usually is. So.
I don't know, man. Dad life, doing the dishes is sometimes a little bit tranquil. It gives me an excuse to
Yeah,
just
yeah,
be on my own.
yeah. Sorry, I can't do anything else. I'm doing the dishes and watching
My
Willem Drew.
hands are wet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Willem Drew's on the TV. Like I just I gotta be here for a while.
I gotta watch it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um.
Yeah, but I guess as a whole, I see a young, stable, set midfield, with the exception of Wines, who's obviously, man, yeah, it's just amazing to think that he's now one of the elder statesmen, and I remember his debut season like it was fucking yesterday.
mhm.
Um, him being the young upstart who's going to impact our midfield, and now, yeah, he's the one kind of leading the others. But the point still stands that as a whole, the emergence of Jace Burgoyne, that is last year, I really hope that continues. He had 17 disposals in the Indigenous All Stars game too, which
Yeah, he
is
was up and
promising.
about.
Shows that
Mhm.
yeah, still capable of finding the footy in a team chock full of talent, which was on Saturday.
He looks a bit
Um,
stronger as like he's a very slender bodied guy, Jace, but just there's a little bit more definition to the body. I think he's
yeah,
just put
yeah.
like
Well,
yeah,
Sean, his uncle filled out quite well
yeah,
over his
yeah.
career, and I mean even his old man, a bit more nuggety in my opinion, but yeah,
Still filled out a bit
yeah.
as he went
Yeah,
on. Yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah. And I just think Jace has added just a touch of definition. Still a very slim, slim Reaper kind of like build, but
I like that.
yeah.
Slippery. But yeah. Yeah,
um,
and hopefully he'll prove to be that. We've got a magnificent tagger and midfielder in Willem Drew, who we just mentioned, WD28. Those shirts will be getting a run around.
mm.
All of the men in my football attending family have WD28 shirts now, so shout out to them. Yeah. What do you say? I guess we could touch on Rosie. We kind of did just then, but
hmm
I think in terms of, because I kind of coming to, like, after last season was finished, all the dust had settled, trades had come, in and out, recruiting and whatnot, and then coming into this season, I just kind of look at the players and think, you know, did you hit the ceiling last year? Do you have room for improvement? Did you fall back? Kind of thing. All of that kind of goes into the noggin, and Rosie, uh, he did kind of regress in a minor extent, or maybe he didn't live up to a lot of people's expectations as a first year captain. But the good thing, in my opinion, is, and while we would agree that he had a good year, I think he's still got room for improvement off the
hmm
back of last year, both as a leader and as a player in his own right, which is exciting, because he was up there in tackles, he was up there in pressure acts last year. He averaged maybe mid-20s in possessions, maybe low to mid-20s in possessions. So, like, you would expect Butters to continue in his merry way, Drew to do Drew things.
Mhm.
So the good thing is while it's very settled uh, and youthful, I guess you could say, we've still got players who could reach another level in a way, and improve on their last years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Zach Butters one is just the one that's for me because I don't finding where Zach Butters can get better is an interesting one, but it's probably more just those
Yeah.
games where we had a few of those games where the games got away from the midfield, and it's finding that way to, impact a little bit more in that sense. But yeah, Butters and Rosie
If
led
yeah,
like disposals per game. Butters was 27 last year, and the next second was Rosie with 23.6. So um, Ollie Wines was third, just below, very close to Rosie, and then Dan Houston was fourth. So that's 23 disposals a game from Dan Houston that is going to be replaced by someone else, essentially, more or less. However you moneyball that out across players, or if someone's going to take that
yes,
role, yeah.
yeah,
But
spread it out. Yeah.
yeah,
The thing with Butters though is, say he hit his ceiling last year, it's a pretty fucking good ceiling, and therefore, if you plateau from that point, that's I'm more than happy with that. Like you said, obviously there's room for improvement with any player, even a
yeah,
Brownlow medalist, whoever that may be. Uh, yeah, everyone's still looking for little bits and pieces.
mhm,
But yeah, if to say that someone's hit the ceiling, it may not necessarily be a bad thing, as
yeah.
long as they don't regress from there. If
I
it's a
think
high ceiling, that
yeah.
is.
I think Butters is at that point where he's like, he's third in the Brownlee last year voting anyway, and he's clearly in the impact he had on some games. But he did have those games where there was that little period that he was getting tagged a little bit heavier, and we were trying to figure that out. And then we worked out how to move the tag off
It's
him a little bit
true.
more. So
That's
there was a
very
little bit of
true.
that through the middle of the
Hmm.
year. Um, they take him off and put him on the bench for a while and then bring him back on. And I think I think the Kangaroos game was one of those ones that he kind of found it a struggle to get into the game, considering the opposition it was. They were one of the ones I think that really put a hefty tag on him, and so there is a
Yeah,
little bit.
that's a good point you
I
raised. It's
think
something
he
that
and
I actually forgot. Yeah.
yeah, I think he and Rosie both. There was just a little bit of those new issues for them last year, whether it be Rosie trying to deal with injuries and coming back from them and captaining, and then Butters just like the tag stuff and
Hmm.
yeah, we've got a lot of players that may because the tag came back a bit like the tagging's a bit more in vogue again. So we might have to deal with that a bit again this year, and it'll be interesting. But that's the good thing is they dealt with that last year. It's not going to be they still got to figure out how to deal with it. But I think as the year went on, they did start figuring out how to kind of move the pieces around a little bit to deal with the tag. But we do have a midfield that's going to be very dynamic and teams will look to put the tag on possibly this year again. So that will be the thing. How do they
Yeah.
deal with that? And but yeah, luckily we do with those points of difference in there and have the pieces to move around a little bit as well. So yeah, I have no. I guess probably the one thing is just those games where we got over. But if we're playing a little bit different style again, and again, I'm really intrigued to watch the preseason game this Friday to see kind of how that style actually looks because I'm trying to how they're going to move the ball and protect that forward line while protecting the back line as well through the middle because it was those games that the midfield just got simply overrun last year at times when we couldn't get the ball forward and couldn't really defend the run of an opposition coming through our midfield either. Um,
I think that's for me a big opportunity for improvement
mm,
is that defensive structure up the field.
yeah,
Because, like we mentioned, the defense sometimes were made to look a bit silly and out of position. But when you look into it, you could attribute some of that to pressure up the ground or lack thereof, and or
mm,
maybe the high press being a bit too high. So
yeah,
that'll be one point of intrigue for me in terms of the forwards to one extent. With SPP, that'll obviously help dramatically. But
mm,
then, yeah, the centre line. Another year, yeah, being a young midfield, and like you mentioned, Butters being tagged, just learning opportunities and see how they've adapted coming into a
Mm,
new season, and whether, yeah, we see a bit more of a refined defensive structure in our midfield for when, yeah, the ball does get turned over. Because at the end of the day, statistically speaking, the team who wins the premiership, the high majority of the time, are top six for defense. That's points against, and they're in the top three, I think, for turnover. And
mm.
that's a marriage of how well you defend turnover and how much you benefit from turning the ball over. So, um, the midfield has a big part to play in that. And I'm hoping, yeah, albeit while they're fairly young, I mean, but some of these, like Butters, Rosie, Drew, and that, they're all in their mid 20s now. Burgoyne's
Mm.
obviously a bit younger. We haven't even mentioned Jackson Mead. He
Yeah.
obviously didn't make it in either of our first teams, and he played, what was it, every game last year. So,
Yeah.
bit unfortunate for Meady, who I thought he had a fantastic year in
Yeah.
relation to his career that up till that point. So again, another preseason, another year to learn, develop. Um, both his game and his relationship with his teammates if he is required, which, yeah, look, again, we keep going through these lines and the players within our team. And yeah, lots made about Houston going, but the team clearly showed, and on paper clearly shows that we've got a lot to offer around that and basically render that change somewhat useless in a way, for want of a
Yeah.
better word.
I
Um,
think, yeah, I think we have a good enough list and good enough points of difference there too that the Dan Houston loss doesn't need to be. It's the Moneyball thing. It's just like, you need to have dynamic coaching thought, and so there has to be a lot of that will fall on Hinkley and the line coaches as well. Um, but yeah, like as far as like the Dan Houston loss, like again, it's just movie reference city, but and I do this all the time. It's a money ball. It's like you're not replacing the player, you're replacing the impact. So
mhm.
um, yeah, you're never going to replace a Dan Houston, much like the Oakland A's weren't going to replace Giambi, but they were going to replace what Giambi brought to the team. Which
Yeah,
you got to lose, you do
spread the
have to,
load.
yeah, you got to lose sight of the player's face and actually just look at the raw data and what they provided the team and go, well, we've got all these guys that do this, and we brought up some of those stats earlier, the effective disposals. A lot of those guys around Dan down there, and some of those ones on the periphery, like Josh Sin, were just down that list as well. So, and Josh Sin again, like on your bench, I don't think he wasn't in my best 23, even though I want him to be in there. How I didn't get him in there, I don't know. But there is all this stuff around that just makes you go, yes, if we do make the right decisions and players perform their roles. Now it could all go to shit and it doesn't work, and then everyone will start crying about Dan Houston. But the reality will be, it won't be because we lost Dan Houston. It'll be because we didn't do the right things. Like because there is just the list
Yeah,
profile and everything. A play, particularly in a sport where you have 18 players on the field at any one time, one player like a Dan Houston shouldn't make that much difference. You should be, and
no.
with a
David
talented
King
list.
would probably argue otherwise, but he seems to put an inflated price on Dan Houston and his impact. And
Number one kick in the competition.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That got it done. And we did kind of frank his ability within our and to we did frank his ability
Oh, we
within our
loved
game
having
plan,
it.
I
We
should
loved
say.
having him. Like
Yeah.
when you have that guy, you use him, but when you don't, you can't make it as an excuse to, yeah, it's just, I've you watch teams all over I mean, it depends on certain sports. There's positional players like the quarterback in the NFL is everything because if you have a decent quarterback, you can build around that. And but there's still other positional needs. But and Dan Houston played a quarterback role, but just in the modern AFL, you can like, you've seen teams lose. There's a lot of teams have lost some talented players over the years and still and found a way to sometimes get better. There's opportunity within that to because maybe we were too Dan Houston reliant at times. Like, let's get this guy the ball and see what he can do. Like, whereas if we get three, two or three players that go, we want you to do a little bit of this, and maybe it spreads the lines. And I don't know.
It's an
I'm just
interesting point. Yeah.
yeah.
That's the
Um,
Moneyball side of things
yeah,
that you're
that's just
speaking of.
what I like. I'm sitting here going, well, Dan Houston's gone. It's the control what you can control thing I thought was saying at the start. Like we can't. He's gone. We can't. We have no control over that now. What we can control is how we deal with it, and we can maybe provide the opportunity that when we had Dan Houston, we just stumbled upon this rookie listed player that suddenly became an All Australian for us, and hey, we had a great time with him. But now the opportunity is to see if we can change the way we play a little bit. Both with Dan Houston gone and Charlie Dixon gone, it's two key pillars of that central thrust for us that are gone, and
Hmm.
it just opens up like again like Jonah Hill in Moneyball being like, I think it's good he's gone from your roster. I think it opens up a world of opportunities for you. Like,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah.
World of opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it
And yeah,
is.
it's all about how you utilize those opportunities. Yes, it could all go to shit, but again, it won't be the fault of Dan Houston being on. It'll be because we didn't do the right things with what we've got. Because we do have
Mhm.
a decent list, whether it's a premiership winning list, we have maybe our doubts on that, but it is a decent list that could, if you make the right decisions, you can improve those players on the list, and sky's the limit after that. So
Yeah, look, and just the broader points further than 2025, it's a good list that looks to be that it'll um be in good shape as the years progress.
yeah,
Like I'm expecting a good year, maybe not a great year, but there's a lot of these players who, in a football sense, haven't hit their peak yet, potentially. So that's
mm,
exciting too, and we get to watch it all unfold. But chock full of talent. The depth, I don't know, depending on who you ask, because we've lost, yeah, a couple of players who were central to that specific game plan. Yeah, our
mm,
depth has been questioned, and while we've been talking tonight, some of the names that we've left out of our side is just been, oh shit, well they're unlucky, and I forgot about me, Lockie Jones for one, and
mhm.
yeah, so um, barring a bit of early season like injury cover, yeah, trying to be pragmatic and objective. The list and the players seem to be in a good spot.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons to be exciting, as you said, just for not just for this year, but going forward into future years as well. We've got a good core, and some of the players that we've brought in this off season, while maybe we didn't set the world alight, there could be potential. I mean, we haven't, it's not really probably pertinent to anything immediately in the future, but the likes of Jack Whitlock and Christian Moraes Christian Moraes was thought of as a top five, top 10 pick a year ago, and then dropped down the list, and we got him at 36 or 37, whatever it ended up being, and
I think he'll surprise
yeah,
this year, but potentially in the early parts of his career.
yeah,
Just something about him.
yeah, yeah. No, we love the way he carried himself on draft night as well. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess before we get to a few fun questions to just finish off the podcast and some of the things we are, just little things we can be excited for this season. Where are you at as far as like you did mention it on the Eddie Corns podcast, and shout out to Eddie again. Thanks for having us on. We'll talk to him a bit throughout the year as well.
Yeah. G'day, Eddie.
Yeah,
Listener of the pod, friend of the pod.
yeah, um, yeah. Where are you at on this year as far as your, whether it's your head or your heart or the mixture of the two as to where we get to this year? And obviously, since the Eddie Corns podcast, we've had the Ken news as well. So where are we at, Jamie? How are we feeling?
Oh, look, obviously speaking about our lines, dissecting them a little bit has filled me with a little bit of excitement, but I still want to temper that a little bit and stick to my guns in saying that, like, I think we're in, this gets said every preseason, but I genuinely think we're in for one of, if last year wasn't the most even season that we've had in since the equalization policy, like this year it firms up to be just as even, if not more of a challenge. And in
Hmm.
saying that, I think it's going to be hard to make the top four.
Yep.
And I do still envisage us having a good season. We'll have our challenges as any year does. But I do still see us potentially hosting an elimination final come September.
Mhm.
Um, I hope I'm wrong. I mean, at various stages over the last couple of years, yeah, we've been written off, and we finished second last year and top four the year before. So they could do it again. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely, they could do it again. We are Port Adelaide after all. We tend to get written off every year. And yeah, four out of the last five, we've punched above our weight big time in the minor round, that is. So, yeah, look, fifth or sixth is where I'm landing. Still genuinely excited. I'm excited to see who's going to improve and how our team looks. So that's where I'm at. How about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I just think top four might be, but last year was a really impressive effort, particularly after that, that Brisbane loss in mid-year where it could have all fallen apart, and we've fought our way back to finish top four in what was an incredibly tough year for to find yourself in positioning. But of course, we know how that went in the qualifying final, and it didn't really matter anyway. So, yeah, it's just like when you look at Brisbane going from a home elimination final through to the grand final and winning. And looking as energetic as ever on grand final day and completely overrunning the Swans, you kind of see that just the modern AFL, you don't that home elimination final might be a good place to be. It's one of those things. It's like, would you prefer a home elimination final or a away qualifying
Mm,
final? It's a really
Pre-finals
interesting.
bye, I
Yeah,
think, has a lot to answer for there.
yeah, exactly. And then yeah, if you go to an away qualifying final and lose and have to come back home, you're kind of running off that. There's a bit of a downturn in form, in momentum and mentality. Whereas I think Brisbane got like fortified as a club by going the hard gauntlet last year. So you know, but yeah, I don't think it's a premiership side that we've got this year, but we should be good enough to make finals. And then once you're in finals, you ride the wave until you're out of it. And like Brisbane did last year, they rode the wave all the way to a premiership.
Yeah,
Oh,
you just
oh
hope
no,
you catch fire in some
exactly. If you
regard.
get fit at the right time of year and you've got players in form, and as we've said, we've got some reasons to be excited this year. If we're reasonably fit come finals time and we've made finals, then you just have a crack at it and see what happens. Um, Yeah, I am I'm of your opinion though that I think we don't slide like some are expecting us to, but we just slide enough to drop out of that top four battle maybe. But again, I think it's going to be tight. It could just be a matter of percentage or a game or two. Brisbane finished three places below us last year, and it was only a game and a half behind us. So yeah, it was very, very tight, and
Exactly right.
I think it'll be the case this year. I just think we'll find ourselves a bit more in that mix. And it could even be that, it's a game or two between finishing fifth and finishing eighth, maybe. And you're actually not that much worse than the team in fifth or fourth, but you're in eighth and in an away
Mm.
elimination final at that point. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year, but yeah, I go in with trepidation, but excitement for what this year means for both for this year, but even just looking beyond that for the future now that there is that weird thing about this year, knowing that we're going into next year with Josh Carr as coach. Like, it is a very weird situation, but there is reasons to utilize that to be excited for the future as well. So that's kind of what I'm
Yeah,
taking with it.
yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty, let's have some fun just talking about a few things that we can look forward to this year. Just to finish off on a positive note, as we've just talked about, being like, oh, I guess we'll finish in the bottom half of the top. um, a few just wonderings and predictions for the year. Nothing that we're putting money on, but I think at first an intriguing question to.
Although,
Well, yeah, no, I will be putting some. I always put a Brownlow bet on and whatnot. So, um,
gamble responsibly, of
yes,
course.
exactly. Not that we're sponsored by any of them, and won't be, but yeah, um, yeah, I always put a Brownlow bet on just for my own fun, and I put on a bet on Ollie Wines at 81 to 1 back in back when he won. So
As did I.
that was
Mm.
a nice fun little bit of spending money at the end of that year. I guess maybe that's a good place to start. Who do you think at Brownlow? And this is an interesting question, I think, because So Butters was our clear Brownlow front runner last year and finished third. Great year for Butters. Probably going to be up there again. But we've also got HORNE-FRANCIS, who's shown a clear inclination to get the attention of umpires, including quite controversially for a 13 disposal game in his first year at Port, um, which I find hilarious. And there's plenty of examples of that beyond Jace. But yeah, who do you think our front runner for Brownlow votes will be this year? There's a lot of guys on our list that can attract votes. It's funny that we just mentioned names and don't even mention Ollie Wines, who's still playing pretty good footy as well.
Who has won a Brownlow
Yeah,
himself.
with a up until this year record vote total.
Yes, yeah, exactly right. Look, I mean, Eddie asked a similar question. My answer to that was JHF. Uh, I have, I mean, Saturday's game against Fremantle kind of, yeah, made me feel a little bit more confident in that. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's proven vote getter. Another preseason, he's gone away, worked on his body, can impact multiple areas of the ground. So, yeah, I'm thinking that JHF will be our Brownlow front runner.
Yeah. I was closing on JHF, but I'm gonna stick with Zach as my front runner. I think if he has a year even the same as last year, he's just gonna collect votes. And I think I think he might. While we talked about if he hits a ceiling that's pretty good and plateaus at that and just stays at that for the next few years, we'd be happy with it. I think Butters might just find an extra edge to his game this year, as long as obviously fitness and all those things, those intangibles that we just can't know until they happen.
I'll be
But
here for that.
yeah, but all going well, I just think he's going to find. I think we're at the point now that Butters is going to round out some of those edges of his game. Now he's found what it takes to be at the top level. Now he's going to round it out and become more consistent. And I think with what we saw from him last year in the Brownlow votes, if we're winning, and it obviously goes to your overall team performance in getting the votes as well. But I think
Sure.
if we win, if we're making finals, then Butters is going to be collecting a fair few votes. So I'm going to go with Butters. For me, I think if both Butters and JHF collect a bag of votes, a la Boken Wines back in 2020, sorry, 2021, when Boke had 25 odd votes when Wines had these 36. It was a pretty. If we
Hmm.
have a year like that from JHF and Butters, will be
Yeah.
pretty happy.
What a good
Um,
season that was. What a shit end to it, though.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, moving on from that, just an interesting point on from a punting point of view is they've
mm,
got Butters at $21 and JHF is the immediate next. This is on tab, by the way.
yeah,
$23 for JHF. And there's no like opposition players in between. It's like obviously got your Dacos as the front runner at the moment, and then it
mm,
works its way down. But yeah, Zach and JHF are right next to each other in the betting. Zach obviously a couple bucks shorter odds. So yeah, interesting to see how that'll play out as the season runs its course.
that's a pretty good like kudos to where the punters or the where the bookies see JHF already as well. Um, because he's a few years
Yes.
younger. Like, yeah, for Butters for him to be that close to Butters already, considering he's only a few years younger, but it's still there's relative youth to that. And
Mm.
yeah, no,
And
that's
I
a
dare
that's
say they may have got a few extra pennies chucked in the pot on Saturday night.
yes,
So,
there would have been
which,
a few. I
it
would
would have
have
been interesting to see where he was before then.
yes, yeah, no, that would have been interesting to see. I wish I'd maybe put some on before then, but I was still thinking Butters at that point anyway. So um, neither here nor there. I think a really intriguing question for this year, as we talked about a forward line. Who our leading kicker is going to be. And before I let you go with that, I really want to see. We've had a lot of years, apart from Charlie kicking 40 odd, I think in 2021. We haven't had a real big goal kicking year from a forward for a while. Like even 40 odd is,
Mm.
with, even the Crows had Tex
Yeah,
kick
because did
70.
George crack the 40 last year or did he fall
He
just
just
short?
cracked. Oh no, actually, he might have kicked 39 or something like that. No, I think he. Hold on, I do have this stat in my. I'm going back to my Craig total. Yeah, no, George kicked 44 last year, but we've had a lot of guys get to 30, 40, but and since apart from Jay Schultz back in, just haven't had. I want to see guys cracking 50 comfortably, possibly closing in on 60. I think it's probably been the one thing, and we just haven't had big big forward totals for a while. Um, but Mitch, considering he's coming back from an ACL last year and all that stuff, kicking 44 from 20 games is probably a pretty good result, and we're pretty happy with what he provided. Um, Willie Rioli was second with 33. Darcy Burn-Jones with 28. 28 was third, and Jason Horne-Francis with 27 was fourth. Obviously, big changes to the forward line, new additions. Where are you at with maybe who might lead and who might be second? I think maybe give me your leader and then who's going to be second in command as far as goal kicking as well.
I do think George will back it up again.
Hmm.
Um,
I think the second in command
and
is a more interesting question, isn't it?
oh well, I think Jack Lukosius. I think he'll have a
Hmm.
point to prove. I think he'll be somewhat of a focal point, but a lot has been made of his season last year. But his last season under Stuart Dew, I think he kicked 40 goals himself. So,
Yeah.
or close to it. Uh, so with a reinvigorated year, hopefully, from a
Hmm.
personal sense, uh, yeah, a game plan that tries to utilize him. Yeah, and a bit of a point to prove. I think he may find himself up there. You just mentioning about someone having a really big year with the forward line that we have and how we may structure up. I think it will be fairly spread.
Hmm.
Some of those numbers from last year, like you mentioned, I don't think DBJ will be up there again, to be
Yeah.
honest. But Willie, I expect Willie to contribute just as handsomely as well. So, um, and I think that while those big years, big bags for those, yeah, big name forwards are sensational, I'm probably still pretty comfortable having more forwards kicking an even number of goals or, all contributing, should I
Mhm.
say.
I was very spoiled in like I think we were all very spoiled in that first year is when Port came into the competition and Scott Cummings just pops up with 70 like um
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah. And then a pretty handy forward took over the reins after
yeah, I mean
that.
Treadray's 03 versus through 05, I think he kicked he kicked 80 in the premiership year and it was 50, 60 odd the year before and 50 odd so he had a 3 year period where he kicked 160 odd. So
Ridiculous. It's just
yeah, or
ridiculous.
yeah, more than that. Yeah, I just looked it up quickly. 2023, Lukosius kicked 39 goals from 22 games, so kind of
There you
very
go.
similar to the George numbers from last year. Right, George's
Hmm.
numbers are a bit better, but yeah, yeah.
Because yeah, finals, which Gold
Yeah.
Coast, yeah,
Well, no, it's actually
didn't
George
have
kicked
the luxury of playing.
44 from 20, whereas Lukosius was 39 from 22. So
Oh, right, yeah, of
George is
course, because
better.
yeah, he didn't
Yeah,
start the year. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, but still that similar range of getting 40 odd from 20 odd uh, to boil it down to generalities. Uh, yeah, I'm of the opinion that George, if he's fit this year, and George finally found both fitness and confidence last year. Like I think he came in, took the world by storm, but like he was a raw player, and then like
yeah,
he got the yips for the first time, and then we had that period with the yips, and then he did his ACL. He had the year off, and he come back in and we've seen it happen a lot at Port, where there be, Kane Farrell you mentioned earlier,
Kane Farrell,
Robbie,
yeah, yeah,
Robbie Gray's
Hamish
obviously,
Hartlett,
yeah, and Robbie Gray's the great example of like him having that year off the ACL. Everything clicked from that point on
he's the gold standard
as
for
to what,
sure from a Port
yeah,
Adelaide sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
he's the gold standard just as a human being. Um,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
Hartlett kind of had to reinvent himself, but I thought he did that
yes, yeah.
very well.
God, he looked. Did you see that training picture of today?
Yes, yes.
Just give
I
Hartlett like
mean, I
just
saw him at the season launch and thinking
yeah.
like, you're fit as fuck.
Yeah. Well, when I went to the
Like,
open training and he's walking around out there, it's like if he wasn't wearing a different, wasn't wearing like the t-shirt versus what the would have been like, I can't differentiate you from a player. Like, yeah. Yeah, no, miss Hammer being out there. But yeah, I'm of the opinion Mitch, yeah, leads the scoring again as long as he's fit and firing because I just think he's found that
Yeah.
groove now. He's like a bit more mature. He's gone through, not that you should have to go through some attrition in your career, but it generally does. Is the that's the fight or flight moment, and a lot of players,
Yeah.
thankfully, find themselves in that moment. And he came back and he was really confident, and he looks confident again this year as well. Looks raring to go. So yeah, I'm not. I'd love to see Lukosius be the second in command and kick the second bag. I'm gonna sneak in. I'm just gonna because I love him so much. I think it's gonna mean good things for a year if Willie Rioli's right up there as in our goal kicking again. If it's Jack and Willie fighting for that second spot for goal kicking, they're both kicking, kicking a couple a game. Mitch is kicking three or four a game. Jack and Willie are kicking two or threes a game, and they're just switching it off, and they're fighting for that second spot. Maybe I'll just to put my stake in the table in a different spot, I'll just say Willie since he said Jack. But if they're both having a pretty good year,
Jack.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I just really want to see Willie have a similar year to last year. And obviously, if he doesn't even have any injury in the middle of the year, then that would be even better than what he his output would be better than it was last year. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Well, I just love Willie. So,
And
yeah,
I
we want
don't,
to see more.
yeah, now that you say that, since he's come to Port, he hasn't actually had the benefit of playing a whole season because obviously, yeah, in his first season at Port, there was the personal matters that he had to tend to
Mm,
along the way. And yeah,
yeah,
so yeah, hopefully he has a full uninterrupted season. And yeah, our side is the beneficiary of that output.
yeah, yeah. And he looks his demeanor, just both at open training and then even just seeing him in and about the Indigenous All Stars game, seems just from what I can see, reading body language, just seems in as good a place as he's ever been as far as his AFL career goes. So, which is really
Yeah.
a good thing for us. I'm trying to think of, I could look at my phone, but the one that I do have in mind, a really intriguing, like a breakout player for you this year, like someone that's been on our list, so not a first year player, but someone that's been on the list for a few years, maybe has shown signs, but just has it. If there's a breakout, a guy that can break out this year. So, I mean, Jace Burgoyne could be a contender, your Josh Sins, all those kind of guys that have had. I mean,
Mm,
I guess some would
mm.
say Jace broke out last year, but I think he could
I
go
think
a
he
little.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But agree that he has levels that he can still go to.
yeah,
Um, but just to avoid saying Jace, because I wasn't actually
yeah.
going to anyway. I don't know why I just said
I
that.
led the jury a lot there, didn't I? Which
Yeah,
no, it
yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
intentional, but I was just trying to, yeah.
Yeah. Look, purely because I've actually got him, I had him listed in my best 23. Yeah, I'll go with Josh Sin. Yeah, I think
Yep.
there are a lot of high hopes for him this year.
Hmm.
And I think he'll be up to it. My other one may be Lockie Jones, because I think he crossed that 50 game barrier last year. He
Hmm.
had several breakout games, in my opinion, last year. Um, just if he can command a spot will be the other thing. But yeah, considering Sin, I had him in my best 22.
Hmm.
I'm going to go with Sin.
Yeah. I think that Sin's probably right up there for me as well. But the other one I was going to say, if it's not if you weren't going to take it, it was going to be Lockie Jones. That's the guy I've been.
There you
Whenever,
go.
yeah, I just think he's been threatening a breakout at times, and whether it be a series, whether it be the concussion with Aaliyah back a couple of years ago, a few little soft tissue hamstring things going on. I think if
That's
he's
right. Yeah,
had a preseason, if he finally has a preseason and gets the body right, and we know that young players that I guess, and ones that have some power drive through the legs as well, um, you just have to figure out how to manage your body, and you either do figure it out or you don't. But there's a lot of guys, whatever sport it may be, the first 4 or 5 years of Steph Curry's career at Golden State, it was like he's got glass ankles, and then suddenly he's been pretty. He occasionally has a little turn of the foot here and there, but overall, he's won 4 or 5 titles. Um, again, shout out Eddie, Golden State fan. But yeah, like guys can start their career with an injury-riddled career, and then suddenly 10 years later, you go, shit, they had a pretty good last, 5,
Yeah.
10 years. So I think that's what I'm really looking forward to with Lockie. And I think, again, we don't know what's going to happen, but I have high hopes for him. And I think he's shown enough. There's been a lot of detractors for moments he's had, but I think he's shown enough in between that he genuinely has a good read on AFL football. He can impact quite well, and he can read the game. He
Yeah.
understands the game, and
I
he can.
think a
And he
mountain was made, sorry to cut you off.
no, no,
I
you,
think a mountain
yeah,
was made out of a molehill in regards to, I believe was it the St Kilda game where he dropped a few marks,
yeah,
put a lot of pressure on himself. I think, I think a lot was made of that game in
mhm,
particular. And I do actually think he had a mini breakout year last year.
yeah,
If you look at it objectively, yeah,
mhm.
to cut in there.
Yeah. No, no, you're absolutely right, and that's why I keep mentioning the detractors thing because it became such a thing that it carried through to other games. Whenever he'd make a mistake, people would be like, "Oh, you remember that?" And it's just like, you know, it's
Mm,
there's
it's
clear,
football.
but in between all those moments, what we watched and we talked about it a lot was like there's this guy actually making a lot of good decisions. Occasionally, that good decision doesn't actually execution is a little bit fumbly and young player esque, but what we see is his under like, again, it's kind of like the Ollie Lord, his early games. He's missing some goals, easy set shots, fine, but it's all that stuff around that. But what he's doing and how he's showing his reading of the game and what he's doing within that is showing us that he's got AFL player capabilities and high level player capabilities. And I've seen enough of that from Lockie Jones to hope that he can, put it all together this year and have a breakout year. So, yeah, if Josh Sin and Lockie Jones can have breakout years this year, then that's probably going to mean we're actually having a pretty good year. If those
Yeah, our
guys keep
defense
going.
is in good shape, or our
Yeah.
rebound is in good shape.
Yeah. um, who are you excited? Who's the guy? I guess it might have led with this, maybe. I don't know. I'm going to say who's a
Best
guy.
first year player is something that hasn't been brought up yet.
I was going to do that. Yeah, actually, let's do it since you brought it up. I'll bring up the next one after because that one might be a good one to close on. Yeah, best first year player. Like who's going to be our rising star contender? Whether or not they win it, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I mean,
Oh, okay.
Joe
So
Richards
best.
could be a best first
Oh,
year,
okay. So
but not.
best first year player at Port.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Let's go with that. That's
Um,
probably a bet because there's a fair few contenders for that, and that opens it up a little bit. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay, okay. Look,
Let's take Lukosius off the table because he's probably like the obvious pick. So let's take Lukosius
that's
off the.
right. Funnily enough, I didn't actually have in my mind.
Okay, yeah.
What
I
I
was just
was
gonna
going to
say.
say is the next bet, well, what seemingly the next easiest choice is Joe Berry,
Mhm.
which I think if you're going to do someone different, then it leaves another fairly obvious choice as well. So look, I'll go with Joe Berry. I
Mhm.
think I know who that probably leaves for you. Um,
Rory Atkins, obviously. No.
the rat. The rat. Oh my God. Funnily enough, I think he will have more to say in this season than what everyone expects.
hmm
To what level? I don't think it's going to be that high, but I think he'll feature.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean he's had a long AFL career. Like he provides something, whether it's he was the steak
Mm,
knives in the deal
mm.
famously, but yeah, no, Joe Richards is someone that in like just the more I see of him in and around the club, just provides me with more. Because when he was the guy that we were just getting from Collingwood, it was just like, oh, I know of his name, but haven't really, and clearly he'd only played 9 games, but he was highly touted from them, and McRae didn't want to lose him. But more I see of
No.
him around the club. Um, he seems to have there's a stoic head on his shoulders. Just seems to have a quiet uh,
Yeah.
confidence
Just
about what
get down to
he is.
business kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massive move for him, by the way. I don't think we've touched on it on the podcast yet. Whether we talked about it at the end of last year, I can't remember. Him, obviously, the number 35 being not that it was ever officially retired, but unretired on the field for us, for him to take, obviously. John McCarthy was the last one to wear the number. And there's a connection there with the fact that Joe Richards has come across from Collingwood as McCarthy did. It all
Yeah,
happened with
yeah.
the
We
blessing
did
of
touch on that.
McCarthy's family as well. So and I think it's going to be great to see 35 beyond. McCarthy has a great history with us with Chad Corns running around in it for um, winning a premiership in it.
Hmm.
Um,
Who was the one that presented him with the Guernsey at season
yes,
launch, which was
yeah,
good.
which was cool. Yeah, so yeah, the more I see of him around the club, the more I have confidence in him, and that's why he was in my best 23 was because I genuinely just have I had just some vibes that I'm getting from him and what hit the talk of him as a player is coming in. I just think he's at that age profile, like he's mature as a person, so he's like some of those little things, um, foibles that can hit a player of a young that's a traditional first year, coming out of draft player, he's not going to deal with that because he's just as a person, just when you get to
Hmm.
24 versus as an 18-year-old, you have that just a little bit more calmness
Yeah.
as a
The
human being.
prefrontal has just
Yes,
about
exactly.
developed. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And yeah, just the things I'm hearing and seeing about him, it just seems like he's yeah, I'm more excited about him than I was obviously when the trade happened. You're more focused on the Dan Houston part. I was still just like, oh, I guess this guy Collingwood like him, so he's you know it's a good one to get. But you were still more
He's a
focused on
good
Dan.
club man.
Yeah, you were still more focused on Dan Houston leaving than anything else. But now that we're into the preseason and everything's starting to ramp up, I'm really excited. So he's kind of the yeah, first year player. Am really excited to see. Lukosius was a clear, obvious. That's who I would pick, but that's why I took him out immediately because I think that's an obvious one. But yeah,
Yeah.
the two Joes are going to be intriguing parts of the season to see how they impact it because they could both have tremendous impacts. And yeah, potentially, if we have a fairly fit year, hopefully, for as far as squad fitness goes, and it's going to actually provide some selection headaches, which is a good place to be, considering what people think of our
Hmm.
list, what some of the outsiders think of our list. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
yeah. The last one I wanted to put up is just who's going to be. I'm trying to work out how to frame it because there's a way I want to frame it that it's who's going to be the excitement machine of this year, and that doesn't mean the best player on the field, but who's just going to be the one for you?
Sam Powell Pepper.
Oh, I love that. I like that I don't even finish it and you're just like, yes, I have it.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of look, there's a lot of people you could choose from, but yeah, I think last year we all would have forgotten to an extent just what he brings on game day, and I think we're all just gonna have those feelings come rushing back when he gets into his work, and it's one of the best things to watch as a Port Adelaide fan is how he goes about it. So yeah, he's gonna rip it apart this year, I think.
Yeah, yeah, the tackling pressure you're going to provide and just some of that little bit of, that border, like that stuff that's on the footy borderline, but he does skirt that
Mm,
borderline pretty well
mm.
most of the time. And
Even his
even,
finishing too
yeah,
over the
yeah,
last couple of years, like 22 and 23, his finishing as well, like lion-hearted efforts, particularly 22. The perception was sometimes that he was the only one who was fucking really digging in and
yeah,
benefiting in way of goals as well. So yeah, can't wait for him to get back into his work.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Mine is I'm going to go with, Georgiades. I just think whether it be high
Nice.
flying moments or I just think he's going to have, with an extra year of confidence in his legs again post ACL. Um, yeah, I think he tried a few last year, but obviously we've seen him already. He's had, mark of the year in there before, and he's got some great marks in his career already. But I just think he wants to fly this year. I think he wants to both. His dynamism around as a forward is going to be really important, and just his fundamentals as a forward. But I think he's going to provide some moments for us this year that are going to have Adelaide
Yeah.
Oval out of their seats.
Yeah,
which
in raptures, as
yes,
it were.
exactly. Like just that kind of like just that oh my God, what did we just see
What?
kind of thing. Like yeah,
What?
yeah. So yeah, that's my excitement machine for the year. And
Nice.
I'm so stoked to see him play again. Um, I think that's about it. I can't remember if there's any other quick, but I think we've got a good solid couple of hours under the belt here to kind of talk about how we're feeling going into the
Yeah.
year. As the episodes go forward now with some, preseason games and stuff, we'll talk about it more. But overall, we've got our thoughts down pretty well on how we feel about everything overall, I think. So, yeah. And somehow I feel better about it all. This is like the therapy that we do.
Me too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's cathartic, but yeah, I haven't really suffered any loss or anything like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah. It's
yeah,
just like, well,
yeah, it was
it's more
good.
that sports fan thing you do that you're suffering a
That
loss.
reassurance.
Yeah, you suffer a loss before it happens, but then if you talk about it with someone else about how you're feeling, you're like, oh no, actually, it's not. The season's not going to be that bad. Hopefully, yeah,
Hopefully,
we
yeah.
could be here in six
Touch
months.
wood.
We could be here in 6 months going, we were so wrong. Hopefully not. Again, touch wood. But yeah, no, yeah, appreciate the therapy session, Jamie, as always.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe. That helps the YouTube algorithms, and of course,
Chuck a comment on, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, some of the guys slash girls that contributed last year. But I mean, YouTube for one, but across all platforms, it's fantastic to see people engaging, appreciating what we do, and on the flip side, we appreciate the support. It's fantastic for anyone returning or anyone jumping on board for the first time. Yeah, it's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Whether it be Spotify, Apple Pods, whatever, leave reviews, but and YouTube comments and whatever, but as well as just get in touch with us on the socials, whether it be Instagram or Twitter or we're on Blue Sky now as well. I'm going to try and cross post as best as I can. It's sometimes difficult because you just forget one here and there. But yeah, Blue Sky, Twitter, um, yeah, Facebook, and all that stuff. We're all in all places, so you can reach us in any way if you want to, anything you want to provide. I remember there was I'm forgetting their name, but they're a YouTube watcher that provided some really great commentary about iced coffee last year that provided us a fair bit of content, fair bit of content. So yeah, whether it be
Yeah,
football related or just anything related to anything else you want us to chat about,
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's all good. So yeah, no, we really appreciate the
yeah.
support and
Track
yeah,
us down at Adelaide Oval or Alverton. Say good day.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
might
We'll
try and do a bit of that this year, seeing as you're now in the land of um,
Port Adelaide
good
football.
wine and good
Yeah,
food and good Port
yeah,
Adelaide football.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We'll yeah. Um, Are you going to the internal trial on the 7th, by the way? This is probably, we should have saved this for off air,
I
but it's
Yeah, a
fine.
bit of off air chat behind closed
Nah,
doors. Yeah, I don't know at this point, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah, who knows?
I'm going to try to be down
Comment
there,
if you
so
think I should go.
yeah, yeah,
People
yeah,
watching
yeah,
and
yeah. Well, let's
listening.
put up a poll. Should Jamie go to the internal trial? If anyone says no on a poll like that, I'd be like, what is wrong with you? But anyway, yes,
He's got a
we'll,
child, Dave.
yeah. We will be out and about, whether it be at games or otherwise this year. So yeah, say good day if you see us, and yeah, no, appreciate the support. Apart from that, as always, calm the fucking pair. 2025. Let's have a good one.
Go Port.
And they could never